Welcome everyone to the latest in a series of development and support webinars delivered by the NIHR Academy. My name is Lucy and I work at the NIHR Academy as a Senior Development and Support Manager. This webinar, Compassionate and Inclusive Leadership, is delivered in conjunction between the NIHR Academy and our leadership programme partners Capfinity, and it will be facilitated by Tom Lawton. Tom is always looking for new ideas, research, and stories to connect psychology to everyday lived experience. He believes that leadership challenges come in many forms, from navigating complex strategies to dealing with relationships and managing themselves. It's often a mix of all of these, and so his style is to be flexible. I'll now hand over to you, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and a very warm welcome today to this session. As Lucy said, thank you, Lucy. My name is Tom Lawton, one of the coach facilitators with Capfinity. I've been working with NIHR going back to 2019 now. We've run a program called the Future Focused Leadership Program. And I'm just looking through the list of attendees, and I'm sure I'm recognizing names of people. If we've met before, it's nice to see your name up. If we've not, a very warm welcome for the first time. So today, yes, we're talking about compassionate and inclusive leadership. There's a few things that really sit underneath the challenge of this session today that we'll be exploring piece by piece. One of them is the sort of a tension that can sit inside organizations, that you've got a pull in one direction to make sure you're really showing results, a pull to really make sure that you're getting your research going, a pull to be making sure you're moving research forward in whatever way or capacity that you do it. Sometimes, though, that might feel as though it's slightly contradictory to then looking after people, but these two things really do work well together. The more we can actually create compassion and inclusivity in our leadership style, what we're looking to create is a sustainable conditions for people to be able to perform. The other piece that really sits underneath it as well is I'm just seeing lots of pieces here, lots of echoes, making it very disorientating. We have confirmation that sound is not affecting everybody. Okay, I will keep an eye on that in the corner, out of the corner of my eye, just making sure I haven't got double things on. Sorry about this, everyone. Noise remover default. Yep, as set up as best as I can my end. The other thing is difficult is something around our self-concept. If I was going to ask everybody, how many people we got? 234 people on the session. If I was going to ask you, do you consider yourself to be a compassionate person? I'm sure everybody would say yes. And that's the sense we have of ourselves. Compassion, though, is how we put that sense of ourselves out into the world, how we put that into action in the work that we do. So I'll pull up this as a quote. Some of you might recognize it. It's from the wonderful poet and author Maya Angelou. People may forget what you said, but they rarely forget how you make them feel. And this is absolutely key here inside leadership, because so much of leadership is based on those feeling senses that people have. You know, at a basic level, that feeling sense that somebody has around us as a leader. Is this somebody I want to work with, so that I want to put my efforts in towards? Um, is this somebody that I feel safe with? And more than that, is this somebody who energizes me, who inspires me? All of these feeling states are the absolute foundations on top of which performance comes afterwards. So leadership isn't just about what we communicate or the tasks we get done. It's also about the sort of the emotional state that we create for the people that we are leading. So we're looking at the basis of the work we're looking at today is from Professor Michael West. If you don't know Professor Michael West, clinician who's also done extensive work across the NHS, and leads the way in so many areas about understanding of teams, about performance. And we're looking at four key elements then. So the first is compassion begins before you speak. And it's about where you place your attention, how you show up, as I said earlier, and how you're placing your attention on other people. The understanding we have of other people, getting curious, So the first piece then is around noticing other people, and the first piece is how to interpret what it is that we see. Empathy can then come in next as well, connecting with others. And it's not about just an internal point of view. The act of empathy is about then displaying the understanding that we have, and then how we then bring that into action. And noticing this, like sort of placing my attention, understand what I'm seeing, creating those moments of empathy, and then before we then move into action as well. It's these four pieces together is really what we're looking at in terms of compassion. So it's not just about nice leadership. It's about leadership that actually, helps people into sometimes and through difficult times. And as leaders, you will be very well aware that you can't create conditions of comfort for everybody. And that isn't, um, it's something that can often get crossed over in there as well. Are the slides supposed to be changing? Not yet. I was just having a bit of a chat. And then we're carrying on now. So, compassion, we can have a sense of it, but it can be very, very easily undermined. I'm going to take you into a wonderful experiment done in the 1970s. It was called the Good Samaritan Study. And the setup of this uh, was this: a group of trainee seminarians, okay, trainee seminarians, people training to be priests, were given a bit of a brief by the psychology researchers. And what they were told they had to do is they said, in a certain period of time, you're going to have to go from the current building we're in over to a different building, and you need to deliver there a sermon on the Good Samaritan. Good Samaritan, the story of somebody who breaks across the divide of an us and them tribal, you know, uh, sort of hatred almost to help somebody that they wouldn't normally help. So in psychology, this is known as priming. They were very, very much primed to say, think about the Good Samaritan. Now, they're actually split into three groups without them knowing. One group was told, take your time. Hey, you got to head over to the building, but don't worry about it. You've got plenty of time to head over there. The second group were told, you've got time, but you need to keep moving. The third group were told, this is urgent. Actually, you're a little bit late. You've got to be quite fast. Now, the actual experiment was the fact that in between the two buildings, there was somebody laid down. Perfect setup for the Good Samaritan was actually laid down in a doorway that the priests was in the pathway of these trainee priests to get from one building to another. So what the psychologists want to see is what would happen. Is this going to make a difference for these people who are there, and in terms of their background, in terms of what they're thinking about, for what they've got to go and talk about? Is there going to be a difference just by telling them how fast they had to get there? Instinct? Do you think it made a difference? Give me a yes or a no in chat if you like. Just having a quick look while you're doing that, just to make sure if there's anybody. A few sound issues. I hope those sorted out. Ta-da. Anyone? Do you think it'll make a difference? Yes, yes, yes. Of course it did. It's quite shockingly large, actually. So, um, this is what happened. And this is sort of like a real sort of warning piece around what happens to compassion under pressure. So, I think this top one is actually quite low personally. So 63%, for those who are in no hurry at all, 63% of them stopped to help. And and this is where you'd think that may be up in the 90%, but even that the presence of a task and a goal and something they had to do was enough just to sort of push their focus into quite limited space on this. So 63% helped in the no hurry situation. 45%, 5% that dropped down to when people were told they've got to get up and move on, but that dropped down to a shocking 10% for people told you've got to get moving. So what this shows is that despite all of this backup and this sense of this concept about themselves that people have, it's very easy for these sort of blinkers to come in. These blinkers to come in to become much, much more task focused. The brain changes in those moments where we put a slight bit of stress into becoming a little bit more black and white, to noticing less activity and to be solving the problem that's in front of us. And that ability to solve the problem that's in front of you is going to be absolutely core to your effectiveness as in your job. But it's just to keep an eye out, well, what might happen to compassion in those moments? What do I need to keep an eye on just to make sure that I'm not reducing down my own compassion quite as much as this? I would say, I think in reality, what happens is that we have these moments of stress and then maybe we apologize afterwards. It's quite hard to have moments of compassion in the middle of the fast moving activity. It's got an image coming to mind, by the way. If any of you have seen the TV's highly stressful TV series called The Bear, which is about a chef. Give me a thumbs up if you have done. But in the middle of service, when people were sort of shouting at each other, they just had this little kind of rubbing their heart with the back of their fingernails of their hand, just to say, "I'm sorry, I recognise they've just been doing something difficult." So it's like it's very, very hard not to move into this, but we can have some ideas of what we do quite afterwards. So let's do a little exercise just to have a think about attention. So let me do here. Uh, Quick activity. Count the number of fours. Off you go. And type your answers into chat. There we go. So we've got the numbers, is it? One, two, three, four, five, six. Six, I think it is. Tell me people got seven. Unless I'm missing something. Okay, thank you. I have missed one. I must have done. Number of sevens coming up. But there's another question that's sitting in behind this is what's the number that's missing in here? Ah, thank you. Yes. Number three is missing. Okay, you're entirely right. So it's just the idea that on this particular activity, um, our attention is placed in a very, very specific place. But there are details around all of that, which I didn't ask you to have a look for, but it's very, very easy to skip over. And so I offer this as a sort of a question open to everybody here. Where does your attention tend to go to? Because very often, especially when working in social groups, that narrowing of attention doesn't just happen because we're under stress. It might happen because we've got a particular task that we're involved in. It might happen, though, also socially as well, because we're with a particular group of people. And with a particular group of people, we can very, very naturally go towards voices that feel familiar, that are like us, who may be confirming some of the ideas that we already have, who work in very similar ways that we do. Because all of these activities that I've just said, people who are like us, who we feel familiar with, who work in similar ways, all of these activities will reduce down our cognitive load because we're having to do less processing in a social setting about what we need to do and how we need to act with those people. And so that sort of defaulting of the mind to sort of reduce down energy, reduce down cognitive load, to free up the actually quite limited resources of our conscious mind, can then have this unintended side effect of the fact that we might then be not noticing other people. And so it isn't to say that how you be more compassionate, you've got to be more caring. There's actually this first step is really important is how do we make sure that our focus isn't overly narrowed in a particular point, simply because of the circumstances we're in. Again, it can be because of what's demanding our attention or the people that we're with. Excuse me a second. So this first part then is really about thinking how can we widen out our spotlight of attention? And to moving around. And so what we've got here is an image of a lighthouse to say that it's not necessarily we can have this broad beam looking at everybody, but just making sure that we are looking around. looking around inside our environment and just noticing what it is we see. Uh, it could be that you're noticing, yep, there's the people in my line of sight. Oh, there's something which has got a bit of a drama in it, which is taking up some of my attention. Oh, there's something which is some group of people who are behaving in a way that I enjoy. But oh, if I pull back a little bit, what else do I see? I also see some people who are quiet. I also see some people who have got behaving in a way which I wouldn't normally expect them to. I normally see someone who's looking a little bit disheveled when normally they'd sort of turn up to work looking, taking care of, have sort of precise care of their appearance, for example. So the first step of compassion then is to really making sure that we're noticing. Okay. Coming away from what's loud, from what's familiar, what's grabbing your attention into something broader to look at also the pieces that we don't normally see. So I just pop a sort of a question out to you and maybe just sort of put some thoughts into chat. I won't be able to get into everyone at chats, and just to let you know, just because this is going to go on YouTube afterwards and publicly, I'm not going to be saying any names for what people write down. Um, and also this chat, as far as I know, we can confirm that from Lucy, but it's usually by default, chat doesn't come up on YouTube either. So one person in there's put, my attention tends to go to the faces of people and watching body languages. So where does your attention go to, and where might you need to widen it out to? A couple of questions, just chucking some thoughts into chat. So that's coming in. Just going to drink a sip of tea to help my throat. Thanks, Lucy, for absolutely confirming that anything you put in chat is not shared on the recording of the video, and I won't identify any names that come through there. What do you tend to notice, and what might you need to widen out to? Thank you. Some sort of comments coming in. People do notice body language and tone, absolutely. And just to be really clear about this, like body language isn't an exact science. We can't just say that's that body language definitely translates into this particular thought or idea underneath. What we're looking here is just to have those sort of signals. We're looking for the signals. What is it I need to take notice of? And there's a really key part in this, which is around some research done, both in 2009 and also in 2022. And it was into disengagement and burnout. Um, and it shows that the first signal that happens is a withdrawal of energy. Okay, so withdrawal and energy changes appear before any of the bigger ones do, which then might lead to performance drops and even absence. So this little sort of pulling back is a very quiet one, and it's not going to be causing us immediate problems, so therefore we might not notice it. I think somebody wrote in there about sort of the awareness, that almost like a hyper awareness that might have inside an environment. Um, just trying to think. One of the things, and I know I've said it quite a few times, but the our brain will most likely default to paying attention to the activities, the people, which might cause us problems. And so if people don't cause us problems, very much they can fly under our radar a little bit. So if somebody seems okay or isn't actually flagging up a behavior that could be problematic, we might not see it. So the whole point about the widening the spotlight of our attention is to be quite deliberate about it. Let's go on to the next one. Just a reminder, we will have a Q&A at the end. So Lucy might pop in some instructions about how to put any questions into the Q&A that we get through, or you put them into chat and we can collect them up for later on. So just to be a bit more specific about what some of those moments are where we can make compassion a little bit harder. we've got an idea of what we could think about our precious pressure zones. All of this part here is to sort of build up our own self-awareness. What are some moments where I'm able to come across as compassionate and some not? Some of these, the high pressure zones, is a good point to start with. What are my personal pressure zones? So this is a good question for you to have a think about. When is it your sort of your social bandwidth drops? Is it because you got consecutive meetings without breaks? Killer, absolutely. End of day fatigue. You're on a tight deadline. You've got conflict that you need to just get on and get past very, very quickly. Or it could be that conflict's something very difficult, so you end up withdrawing from it. Distracted attention during meetings. There's a lot going on for you, and it's very, very hard to be able to actually place your attention on the people around you. So noticing for yourself about and just sort of building up a sort of the questions in your mind about when are your high pressure zones. Now, going on from that, what are the habits you tend to get into during those times? And the habits, as we said, is the problem with those is we get into narrow focus, sticking with the familiar, making assumptions. Assumptions are great because they're nice and quick and they're pre-thought little assumptions that pop into our brain. Bang, this is what's going on. Trouble is, they're not always correct, especially in social environments. They can often be really off beam. Not fully present to the people in front of you, but more onto the activities that you're doing. Do you prioritize efficiency, getting the task done, or do you jump to conclusions too soon? So, putting it together, we've got pressure, it pushes us into certain habits, and those habits then have an impact. So, say you're in a high pressure zone, you've got back-to-back meetings and you need to talk to somebody, you've only got 3 minutes inside a very, very busy day. You get into the habit of trying to work out exactly what their problem is and what you can do about it, which goes into quite a short clipped language to go, yep, come on, what do you need? What do you need so I can give it to you so I can get it out of the way? The impact is, well, that team member might feel really overlooked. There might be a moment there where there's just a little piece of vulnerability that they're about to open up with, and they just don't feel seen or understood at all in that moment. In this case, one I've just brought out, decisions are made about me, but not with me. I don't feel involved in this. I don't feel. Notice there's a piece that goes back into the leader. What the leader is doing in that moment is that, do I feel safe with my leader? Not entirely. Um, is my leader, and that's partly because of the way the behavior happens in that time, but also then because of the inconsistency in behavior that happens as a result. One of the key components of trust is consistent behavior over time. And I'm sure in a group this size, we probably got a lot of experiences about a leader you might have worked with in the past, where you just didn't know what version of the walk through the door at which time. Am I going to get the nice, easygoing one? Am I going to get the stressed one? Am I going to get the difficult? And that difficulty, that lack of consistency is a massive eroder of trust in one area, but also then, of course, takes us a very long way from compassionate leadership. So this is where we are bringing together two key components of self-awareness. Self-awareness, component number one, understand myself from the inside. What are my pressure zones? What is it like for me in those moments? How can I understand if I'm in a pressure zone? Next part of the understanding piece is what are the habits I go into and what benefits do I get from those habits to be able to get through these difficult times or move so oops, sorry, just an alarm. To move throughout the other side of the difficult time that I'm having. And so those two parts that are internal self-awareness. The third part then, though, is about external self-awareness. How did I come across to other people? What impact do I have on other people? Both of these areas of self-awareness are absolutely key to work together. Number one and number two, we can do that through self-reflection. We can do it. Depending on our ability to introspect, it might take a bit longer, a bit shorter. We might need other help to pick it apart as to what we're doing and where we slip into things. The impact piece is harder to understand And very often we need to build it up through some really good quality feedback and discussions with others. So here you've got three questions just to take out as a self-reflection. You might want to note them down before we move on. When am I most likely to slip into autopilot? What's my default when I get overwhelmed or my bandwidth is just reduced to be able to deal with other people? And how do my behavior land for the other person? Number three, you might not know. Or you might be able to say, I think it was difficult. Let me go and find out. We're going to go on to the next part now about how it is that we make connection with other people. So, what is it that they want and they need from us in moment by moment? And I'm going to introduce you in this one to a fantastic piece of work from my favorite piece of psychology. A psychologist, a couple, John Gottman. I've forgotten her name. I think it's Mary, who worked together. Anyway, but who set up a they wanted to know what makes a good relationship, and they were working principally in, couple relationships in marriages. And what they did is they set up a lab, and they call it a love lab, and they got people to move in there, couples, and they recorded, their interactions, the way that they talk to each other, in an effort to try and understand what makes a high quality relationship. What they found was they got into something absolutely key, fundamental building block, and it was called the bid for connection. Okay. Um, what makes a good relationship is how many of the high quality responses to this bid for communication that we do over a period of the relationship. So, I'll give a sort of an example. Imagine you've got a team member who comes in, um, and they said, uh, can I talk to you a second? I've just had a really difficult phone call. Okay. What we've got there is some information coming across from them to you. Quick request to talk to you, and that they've had a difficult phone call. There's not much more in there. We don't know the nature of the phone call. We don't know what they're feeling. We just kind of simple request coming across from one to the other. Sometimes it might not even come with a "can I talk to you?" It could just be, "I just had a difficult phone call," without a request in there at all. The bundle around those words in the middle of that is this strong bid for connection, because something's up and they want to get a connection with you in that particular moment. So John Gottman found that there are three basic ways that we can respond to it. The turn towards response up the top is, we're sitting there writing at the computer. Oopsie, sorry, let me turn. Just do a fake typing. And we stop and we look at them and go, okay, yeah, sure. Tell me more. What's up? It doesn't have to be a long piece of, discussion we have with them, but there's a very strong piece there that I'm placing my attention on you because I'm picking up there's something there you want to talk about. That's a turning towards response. I'll go to the last one down the bottom, turn away response. This would be where we're sitting there typing away our email and they come and say, "Oh, I just had a difficult phone call." We go, "Oh, yeah. By the way, have you finished that project?" It can also look like something else, the turn away, which would be like, "Oh, was it with yeah, with that other research group? Yeah, yeah, I've had a difficult meeting with them too." Where we've not actually acknowledged what they're saying and what they're thinking. We're just doing this sort of show of empathy by talking about ourselves instead. Um, so that's called turning away. So the request comes in, but our attention heads off in a different direction. Turn against would be, I mean, up here we've got quite a mild one, but in John Gottman's work, he could found these could be sort of, quite blatant attacks on other people. "I have a difficult phone call." It's like, "Oh, come on, just get over it. Just, you're always having difficult phone calls. I haven't got time." Where we actually go and have attack at the other person. Out of these three, which one did John Gottman do you think he found to be the most destructive in relationships? Number one, number two, number three. Put your votes into chat. What do you think was the most destructive? Some people put number one. No, number one's a good one. I'm talking about the most destructive. Yeah, you'd think turn against, but actually, the research that they found, and some of you put down number two. Sorry, number three. Sorry, I've got my numbers wrong. Number three is absolutely correct. Yes. Yes. Number three is the correct one. And for those of you who sort of put in number two, thinking turn against would be very destructive, just think about what it's like when somebody comes and we go and talk to somebody, and they may use some of the same words in their response to us, but they're there but not there. You've had a difficult meeting. I had a difficult meeting the other day. You're using the words difficult meeting, and it sounds as though you're responding, but you're not. And there's that real sense, where are you? What's going on? Which is a really, really difficult place to be on the receiving end of it. So turn against, by the way, and I'm sure all of us at some point have known couples who just like being in a non-stop argument for 20 years, and you look at them and go, how are they together? And the answer is, as human beings, we need connection more than we need harmony on this one. And so there is something when people are in a kind of a battle with each other, at least they're acknowledging each other. And that need for that recognition and validation is an absolutely key need in there. And that's the one that's missing in the third option that so many of you identified as being the most destructive. Do we have to turn towards every single emotional bid towards us? No. In the best relationship in John Gottman's work, it was around sort of, I think around 65% of the time that couples were doing this to each other. And those were the highest quality relationships above all. So it's not that we have to be perfect, but I love this piece of work because it somehow takes the mystery of relationships and gives us something quite concrete that we can do. And that is just recognize those little moments when people might want a connection with you and just see what you can do just to stop and turn towards. One manager I worked with, I think it was the Ministry of Justice years ago, he said, I did this and it changed my life. He said, I'll always be like multitasking and doing other things. And I stopped. I give people my full attention. It makes the conversations quicker, the relationships better, and I'm able to really sort of develop people around me because I'm giving my full attention. And of course, it's a much nicer way to behave as well. By the way, if you are busy, if you're there and you've got 5 minutes to finish something off, turn towards response can still happen. I'm just doing something. I've got 5 minutes. Can I come and find you at 2? That'd be all right. Okay, great. I'll come and find you. Totally a towards response. I recognize something's up for you. I just need to have my space to finish off right now. So here are some ideas for how it is we can turn towards people. Some different responses. Actually, sorry. There are different ways that people can turn towards. We've got here, we're going to open up actually, we've got 3 different responses here, all of which look like a turn towards response. But we'll give a little bit more detail around it just to see whether these really are a turn towards response on each of them. So here's what you should do. That sort of looks on the surface like we are really turning towards something. But the trouble about this is that we're getting in and we're wanting to tackle the problem. So what it sounds like is here's what you should do, where it focuses on the problem. And the impact is that you just show you want to get things fixed and move on. There's also a real danger with this one, is we can probably end up solving the wrong problem because we will often, if we want to jump in, especially on this one, before actually unpacking something, we'll probably do things what we think is the problem. The next one, I'm really sorry, that sounds hard. By the way, none of these 3 are wrong. But it's just about where it is we might want to put them inside a conversation. So this is really what we call sympathy. I'm sorry that sounds really hard. If we get stuck on that, We can be really focused on our own reaction, our own emotional feelings in sympathy with the other person. What feeling am I feeling according to the situation? Um, the impact is they do feel acknowledged. It does show very much a sense of the person I'm talking to is really making an effort to understand my position. Now, I don't know about you, if I'm going through a tough time, I would like some words of sympathy, but if I get stuck there, it can be quite difficult. Empathy. Help me understand what this is like for you. What it focuses in on their experience. And as a key component inside compassionate leadership, this is the one which is probably like the most powerful tool out of these three. I think all of them have a component inside compassionate leadership. Just to open up empathy, for those who haven't come across it, there is a dual sort of bandwidth, a dual sort of strands of empathy that happen both at the same time. The one that's up on the screen is very much around the idea of cognitive empathy, which is I want to understand what's going on for you. And I want to sort of build up that sense of what the circumstances are, what the issue was, how that's impacting you, so that I can get the world from your point of view. That's a very, very powerful sort of form of empathy called cognitive empathy, about the understanding of where somebody is. There's another strand of empathy that sits sort of parallel to, or sort of goes with it, which is called affective empathy, which is a bit more into the sympathy side of it as well, which is where we're having that feeling come up too. Um, Now, on our really strong relationships, the chances are those two strands are working absolutely with each other. Um, and that will be for our close relationships, etc., because we understand the context that people are sitting inside, and because they're very, very close relationships, we're going to be very, very tied in with them and feeling things at the same time. But those strands don't have to work together. So for neurodivergent, especially autistic people, for example, one of the models that goes around and helping, understand the experience of autistic people is that they can have a very, very strong affective empathy. So they can feel the feelings of people around them, but the cognitive empathy is a more difficult thing to put together. So understanding how somebody's feeling in that position might be a more difficult task than the actual sense of the feelings. They get the impact of the feeling, but with the understanding being much reduced. But you also might be in a situation where you're not having big feelings triggered off by somebody else's difficulty. What does empathy look like in that case? Maybe it's much, much more a sense of the cognitive empathy instead. I'm going to make sure I'm putting effort into understanding why you're feeling the way that you do. Just looking for my glasses so I can read the checkbox a bit better. Great. Okay, so let's come on to what is compassion? Here we are, just in the last sort of 5 minutes or so of our time together. Empathy combined with action. So you can have all the empathetic feelings in the world, but if that's not actually coming out of you, out into the world, out into some sort of sense of action and help for somebody else, then it's kind of getting stuck. It's not a personality trait. Compassion, we could look like, is the way that, and I know I've used a phrase, and I hope it sort of lands okay. It's the way we show up in the world, and that's a combination of how we hold ourselves, what we do, what we pay attention to, what we get involved in, all of these ways, I think pulling together in this idea of how we show up in the world. So compassion is empathy combined with action. How does that look like in practice, in leadership, in our day to day? We've got three different parts of it here. So we've got a first reaction. The first reaction, we see somebody having a difficult time. And this first reaction could be just, somebody coming in who just looks like completely drained, like the world is just really just looking shattered as they come in for their, but when you see them in the workplace, you're going to have a reaction. Pause. there at that point. Consider their perspective. What could be going on? You know? And this is the pause. The first reaction is going to have a lot of things in there. In as that as well might be that sort of impulse. Let me go and help. But that piece in there about leaders who are getting in and helping and looking after and rescuing all the time isn't necessarily a healthy form of compassionate leadership. Because somebody might not want your help, but they could do with your empathy and your compassion. So, first reaction, pause, consider their perspective. Um, don't assume. At that point, uncover, explore, open up, see what's going on for them. Getting into that cognitive empathy side of it, of trying to work out how things are looking from their point of view and how they've got into a situation that might be difficult. And then when we get into action, this is sort of action with a wisdom here. It's like where we're wanting to help them move themselves forward. And that's different from rescuing or solving their problems for them. And there could be lots of ways we do that. The action could be sitting and listening. The action could be giving a word or two of encouragement if that's what's useful for them. The action could be clearing a pathway, helping them decide in between two competing priorities to help them get on top of a really overwhelming to-do list, for example. So compassion, absolutely key. Empathy combined with action. Um, the quote here, the only thing for the necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. Um, kind of strong words in this kind of moment, but actually, it is, I think in here, I sort of flip it around a bit. It's the compassionate people do something. And sometimes it could be just the little parts that we've covered off today. It could be the little pieces around making sure I'm noticing somebody who otherwise would fall underneath my awareness. It could be responding to one of the bids for connection, which are really key. Um, bring in an example. Imagine that you've got somebody junior in your team who's sort of really good at what they do, but struggles perhaps a little bit with confidence. And you got some other sort of big characters amongst the research group that you've got together. And they keep just sort of talking over this particular person. Now, I'm finding this is quite a sort of distraction at this point. I'm going to cover that over. Um, the idea in that kind of concept, just the word evil was popping out a bit too strongly at that point. The idea, the people who are talking over the quiet person aren't doing anything wrong. It's just an unintended impact of perhaps enthusiasm or lack of consciousness or over focus of sort of like a laser-like focus of what they're doing. So what we're doing in this point is to how can we step in and take action? I think there's something very important inside inclusive and compassionate leadership is to make sure we're putting across everybody. The point around these 3 points here about the 3 steps, about the pause being necessary. Oh, gone way back, sorry. The pause being absolutely key, because if we see that, we might want to sort of jump in and take action straight away. But that might not be the healthy way to actually deal with this situation. Um, that sort of pause and holding back will also then help say, as a leader, how can I make sure that I'm pulling everybody into this situation? And it could well be the person who keeps interrupting, for example, or talking over somebody else. Like I said, what you don't do is they could just have a lot in their minds. It's very important in this case not to do a one in, one out, because then it's a zero-sum game in terms of compassion and inclusion, and that doesn't actually help us. So just so we come up to the end and open up to the Q&A, the ideas that we have in here is if we're putting compassion into practice, start small, you know, just those little moments, that little action. And this is why I think the turn towards is a fantastic one. Start small, see what happens, adjust and change. And maybe you are turn towards, and you find you're giving too much of your time and attention away, and it's taking you away from your own ability to look after yourself. That's when you adjust a little bit. How can you bring boundaries in there piece by piece? Um, Some ideas that we have in here as well. So across the board in your leadership, make your self-awareness visible. Explicitly acknowledge mistakes and thinking processes. That allows other people to do the same. Calmly address micro-incivilities. Micro-incivility would be, for instance, like somebody over-enthusiastic, just cutting off the end of sentences of somebody who is just a little bit more, needs a little bit more time to unpack their ideas in a meeting. And you're nudging people towards a more inclusive behavior at that point, rather than trying to sort of stamp down hard on it. And champion and model inclusive behaviors. So run the meetings in a way that you want people to treat each other, for example. So just at the last part then, compassionate leaders ensure people feel seen. Spot, notice more, widen your attention. Who might be missed, underheard, or underused around you? What are some defaults you go to and some people you might not notice so much because they're not causing problems? Examine, connect with compassion, show people their experience matters and they're not facing it alone. These can be really small moments where we do this. Empathize, start with curious, pause your first reaction, seek to understand what's going on. And if the big feeling states don't come with that, that's okay. If the big feeling states come, but the understanding is harder, it might take some more work to piece together the picture of what's going on. And then the nudge piece, part by part. Act now, not later. And just try out. If I was to do this in a meeting, I think things would be better. Just try it out next time. And the chances are on a lot of these, people won't necessarily notice a very big attention shift. They will just simply feel more comfortable around you. So, uh, and I think the idea on this one is that, every time you widen your attention, you turn towards somebody or you interrupt one of your autopilots, you're changing the culture around you a little bit. And as a leader, your impact, there's a very important piece of work called the shadow of the leader, that all of your actions or inactions make a difference in the culture you have around you. Lovely. Just to point you to some resources, which I'm sure will make you very easily available rather than just having them up on the screen. Um, uh, I want to make sure we got a little bit of time for the Q&A. Lucy, are you going to come on and run a bit for us?
Hi, Tom. I've just noticed my name is displaying as somebody else's name in the chat, which isn't ideal. I am Lucy, rest assured, and thank you, Tom, so much for delivering such a thought-provoking session today. So as Tom said, we will now open up to the Q&A. So Tom, first question for you is just around the Good Samaritan study. So it shows that pressure can override good intentions, even in well-meaning people. But what can we actually do to counteract that in a fast-paced healthcare environment where we acknowledge that the pressure is constant?
Mm, thank you. Um, if we were in a room together, I would at this point be going, you tell me, everybody. And any ideas you got, please do type in. I think the piece that we're looking at here is we're not putting pressure on ourselves to be perfect people. Um, and that there are going to be times that we will fail or fall short. And so I think as leaders, it's making sure we're having it uppermost in our minds to say, I need to create little um, small interactions across the time, just where I'm going to stop, where I'm going to breathe, where I'm going to stop all that sort of movement of ideas in front of me and really look at the person in front of me just to say, how are you doing? And I think that's the part of it. Don't put pressure on ourselves to think that these conversations have to be long or time consuming, because as soon as we get into that, our brains will go, no, more cognitive load, and shut the thing back down again. So start small would be my idea. Please do add any thoughts into chat you'd add on to that. And how do you, maybe I put the question back out, how do you make sure that you find moments to connect and be compassionate in your, especially the clinical leads we have on the, or clinical leads, sorry, the clinical practitioners we have on screen?
Thank you, Tom. That's really helpful. And like you said, really helpful just to hear any individual reflections in the chat as well. We will swiftly move on in the nick of time. The next question we have upvoted is just something to get your view on, Tom, in terms of where you feel the line sits between being compassionate versus actually, where assertiveness might be needed in terms of perhaps cutting someone too much slack or being aware of being taken advantage of. If you're kind of perceived as a kind of super compassionate kind of figure as a leader. So any tips for attendees to be able to identify that in practice and that fine balance, I guess, between maintaining assertiveness.
Yeah, it is a tricky one, and it's one that I sort of I think coming in as an outsider, as a coach, I don't have that problem. I can be fully 100% with compassionate with somebody, and of course I am going to be keeping an eye on what their own particular goals are, um, as well in that one. But as a leader, you've got these sort of two competing priorities. I've got to look after the person. I've got to make sure that the key tasks that we've got are done, that we're moving towards the priorities that we've set ourselves as a group of people. So I would just say that they're not mutually exclusive, and recognizing that tension sits there, um, I think is part of the ongoing, that it's never going to be, oh, I've got the balance perfectly between the two. There's always going to be swings in there. I think as a sort of there's a couple of things that come out of that. Number one, um, where do you place yourself in between being super close to your team or being super distant from your team? If you're super close to the team, it's going to be hard to come out of that and go into the organizational priorities. If you're very, very distant from the team, it's going to be hard to come out of that and go into being compassionate with people. So it's sort of finding your default in between those two extremes. And so you've got a bit of movement either side. And then we'll be able to say, I can see you having a really tough time. Let's focus on what's really important that needs to be done to help you manage to do that. Then we can have that sort of both and that sits in between there. But it's the question I put out for everybody is like, whereabouts are you assessing your default in the relationship between close, focusing on task and focusing on people? Where we want to be roughly in the middle, and that gives us space to move.
Thank you, Tom. Sure, that's really thought-provoking for those who wanted to see that question answered. Next on the list is thinking about how can we lead compassionately when our own well-being is perhaps low. Have you got any tips around that one, Tom?
Yeah, I think this is it's a really key one, isn't it? Because then where we're getting mixed up is sort of, I don't know, compassion and self-sacrificial. Um, when it comes to compassion, to ourselves first and then to others, I think is a real key point in this one. Um, all of the work we've done here is so hard to do if we're not in a space of having been compassionate to ourselves. Um, yeah,
Thank you,
and
Tom.
that
We've got
phrase is
time.
it. 30
Perfect.
seconds. Are we? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, one more question and then we'll wrap up. So it's how can we lead compassionately in an online or remote working context? I think, this is obviously very prevalent for a lot
Yeah.
of individuals now post-pandemic. We're still working in a very hybrid way. Thinking we're often working with people and leading teams that we rarely connect with in person, which makes it a lot more difficult. So any tips around that, Tom? And we'll wrap in.
Well, studies straight off the pandemic showed that our close relationships, as in the people that we talk to all the time, actually improved during lockdown, because we did end up spending more sort of time just sitting quietly and talking to people. So I'd say the capacity is there, but we have to be much more intentional. One of the big problems about working online is that we can default into transactional relationships. Right, what do we need to do? But it's having that space and time to be able to create those really good quality relationships. I just saw the next one I'd love to just to say a word about. I know probably over time. How do I avoid
Perfect.
slipping into fixer mode? And it's just to see it's like I'd say if you have an internal need to help other people, that is a wonderful and powerful driver. If you're trying to fix people, the thing about fixers, they always need people to fix, and that is very disempowering for people on the other end. So the fixed mode is like hold on to your inner drive to look after people, but how do you express it? And then sometimes that same energy for wanting to fix people can then come into how do I help people move forward for themselves? And it's a much, much healthier, much more respectful kind of adult to adult style of relationship in there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I hope everybody's found this webinar beneficial today. It feels like we've covered a lot of ground, lots of behaviours and techniques that we hope you feel able to implement in your day-to-day roles.